bom dia não, boa tarde a todos. Esta sessão vai ser realizada em inglês, mas eu queria antes aqui dar-vos aqui umas palavrinhas em português, só antes de começarmos. Queria só muito rapidamente dar as boas-vindas a todos os participantes. Eu sou o Bernardo Mata da Escola Azul, muitos aqui já me conhecem. Nós na Escola Azul tivemos esta oportunidade de contar com 2 sessões relacionadas com a educação e a ação ambiental, a partir de perspectivas um bocadinho diferentes daquelas que estamos mais habituados. Achámos que era uma boa oportunidade para lançar a nossa rede e não só, e de facto ficamos muito satisfeitos com a adesão que esta sessão de hoje tem e também com a que a sessão da próxima semana vai ter. Nós hoje, inclusivamente, temos aqui algumas pessoas que são de fora de Portugal e temos até mais pessoas inscritas que são de fora do país. Só para fazer um enquadramento muito rápido, estas 2 sessões partem da iniciativa da Laura Abels, que é alemã, da Universidade de Kiel, e que fez um estágio connosco no âmbito da sua tese de mestrado em sustentabilidade, sociedade e ambiente. Foi a Laura que nos abriu esta oportunidade de termos aqui estas convidadas. Temos aqui a Karen Hamann connosco e que muito agradecemos. So from now on, we are speaking exclusively in English. I'd like to thank Karen for this session, and I'll also like to acknowledge and thank Laura so much for opening the door for these opportunities. So Laura, thank you, and the floor is yours to introduce us to this session.
All right, thank you, Bernardo, and hi everyone. It's great to see you here. I hope everyone's doing well. I understood 30% of what Bernardo said, so sorry if I maybe repeat something that Bernardo just said. But yeah, I did an internship with Escola Azul for my master thesis, and it was really great to dive into the world of ocean literacy education. And while doing my research and also working and speaking with people who are part of the network, I felt like people have the need or like the desire to feel more inspired and maybe encouraged on how to really encourage taking action as educators. And so I thought maybe a workshop on this would allow everyone to integrate some of this into their educational work. Yeah, and I hope you find this talk today, and maybe some of you will join also next week, find it inspiring and helpful. It also comes along not only with this talk, but with an exercise that you could do with your students later on. And this is accessible via the Escola Azul website. You can just click there on a link where I think it's under news, and then you find the sessions page, and there you can find the link. So feel free to.
I'll put the link here. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll put the link here in the chat.
In the chat, yeah. So that's gonna be accomplish maybe this session and take the knowledge with you into your schools or wherever you educate about the ocean, basically. And yeah, some practical infos for today. If you have questions during Karen's presentation, it would be great if you put them in the chat. So we will keep an eye on the chat. And if it's especially questions about understanding, so if you don't understand something, then please put those questions in the chat. If you have some further questions, you will be able to ask them after Karen's presentation, and therefore you could use the raise your hand button. You should find it on the bar where you can also mute yourself or unmute yourself. There's this little hand sign. If you push it, we can see that you would like to ask a question. And also please put yourself on muted during the presentation, so no random sounds interrupt Karen while she's talking. Yes, I guess that'll be it for today. And yeah, have fun, enjoy, and I would say the floor is Karen's from now on.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me. I'm Karen Hamann. Right now I live in Leipzig and work at the social psychology department there. and I have a background in environmental psychology and with an organization that I'm going to present to you today as well. And I try to summarize the knowledge that might be interesting for you. I know that a lot of teachers are here and educators these days, and I actually thought about it that I wish that my teachers would have been that engaged and yeah, really diving into the nature protection, ocean protection sphere like you do. So yeah, please, if you have any questions, Laura already said it, just ask them in between. But I hope that I make everything clear and I try not to talk too fast. So I termed the talk today, Let's Take Environmental Action with the Help of Psychology. And here is, let's see, something more about myself first. Okay, it works, great. It's always good to see some thumbs up. So this is my own background. I'm, as I already said, a scientist at the University of Leipzig. I'm a postdoc now. I did my PhD, or I finished my PhD in April this year on the topic of feeling empowered. And currently I'm employed in a project on the topic of energy communities. So how to make energy and renewable energy to spread it around Europe, actually. But this is only like one thing that I'm involved in. I also do a lot of science communication, like this talk today. And this is based on an organization that's called Wandelwerk. It's a group of friends of mine, other psychologists that actually want to spread knowledge about environmental psychology to people who need it, like environmental NGOs or educators. And most of our work for a long time was based on this book that you see here, the Handbook of Psychology of Environmental Protection. And it's open access, and after this talk I will send a link to Laura and Bernardo, and then you can also just download it, and also the presentation, so you don't have to take notes all the time, but yeah, you will have access to them. And yeah, that's kind of the background. And of course, I'm dealing with the topic because nature is really important for me. And I would call myself an environmental activist, and I'm also involved in some organizations in the movement. But let's take a step back and see what is this environmental psychology that I've talked about. It's a niche discipline, so you might not have heard about it so far. And here's a broad overview. So what we psychologists usually do is we look at the thoughts, feelings, and actions of people. So this is what we study. And environmental psychology is about the interaction of our thoughts, feelings, and actions with the environment. And the environment can be very broad. Like, for example, it can be the color blue, which is also quite interesting. The color blue, when we see it, it makes us relax a little bit more. It's also connected to the ocean in a way, maybe evolutionary. But this is also part of environmental psychology, or how architecture should look like for us to feel comfortable in it. Human technology interaction, that's all environmental psychology. But what I deal most with, and also others, is environmental protection and protection of the natural environment. And in this talk today, let's see. Oh no. Yeah, now it works. In this talk today, I will explain a little bit about 3 different types of these actions, especially our actions in the private sphere. So, for example, using reusable bottles. This is one example, but also protests and volunteering that are like key to, for example, protection of the ocean, but also other environmental protection. And now I see that there's already a hand that was raised. I don't know if that's something that...
Yes, I guess it's Alda. Alda, sorry, did you raise your hand? So
she
maybe,
wrote one. Oh.
I'm not sure if she meant it. So
Okay.
let's proceed. Let's proceed.
Sorry.
So that's perfectly fine, because now I would like to first engage you a little bit and see what's there in the room in our own experience. Because I mean, we're all human, so we can know a lot from our own experiences, and it makes it easier to connect the psychological insights that I'm going to tell you if you have kind of a reflection phase at first. So I set up a Mentimeter. I don't know, maybe some of you already have gotten to know it during Corona times. There's the code. And the question is, in which moment did you act in line with protecting the ocean and marine world? And why did you do this? And if you choose the first questions, please make a yes label somewhere there, so we know this is why you actually did protect the ocean and marine world. And in which moments that you think of did you not act in line with these, with protecting the ocean and marine world? This is also really interesting to know in order to transfer from it what the psychology behind it is. And especially the why question is important for us. So please, you don't have to write a lot, but maybe something small. And I will show the screen. And if you enter something there, it should appear. I hope. Okay, great. We have a first answer when I pick garbage in the beach, private and professional. It would be really great if you, focused a lot on the why. Why did you do it in this moment? Because I could take part. This is a good answer. So they're all good answers, but this is already going into the why. So here we have someone collecting plastic at the beach, especially because she or he feels very connected to the ocean. This is kind of like the personal compass that you carry around with you, the emotion that's connected to the ocean. Because everyone can make a difference. It's really good. Self-efficacy, that's also a topic that we touched today. Okay, then we have someone working in marine science. If you want to, you can put in another one with a no. That might be interesting as well. If you can think of moments in which you think you didn't act in line with protecting the ocean. And I see, now we've kind of reached the bottom here. I think the next one's gonna appear here. Cool. So I think Mentimeter has lost us a little bit, but that's perfectly fine. We've got some inspiration here. People said, and I hope you see the screen now again. people said that they felt like they actually made a difference, that they were acting in the private sphere, but also as activists. So they had different surroundings probably that made it easier for them to act in line with their values. Also, the feeling of making a difference was mentioned. So we got some ideas, and you will be reminded of some of the ideas in what follows now. So what I'm gonna present to you today is a more complex idea of how our motivation is structured. And as educators, you've probably heard of some of the concepts, so it might be a repetition for some of them, but as environmental protection is not the same as educating for everything else, there's also something new. And the proposal that I make is that we do need this more complex understanding of human motivation in order to motivate others, to motivate ourselves. And if we plan campaigns, for example, a beach clean, to make them as effective as they can be and also as fun as they can be, and motivating, of course. So we're going to work with a model here. That's a psychological model, and I'm going to walk you through it throughout the presentation. Just ignore the overview right now. It looks like this in the end. And this model is an expansion of the integrative influence model of everyday environmental action by Ellen Matthews. And she combined two well-known models in environmental in psychology in general. The one is the theory of planned behavior that's kind of more appropriate for more high-cost behavior, like, for example, in the environmental domain, switching to a renewable energy supplier would be this. And the norm activation model is for rather this low-key behavior, like switching off the light. And they're kind of combined in this model. And we're going to start with the first component, which is problem awareness and perceived responsibility. And this is what educators usually focus on. So problem awareness is the perception that our natural world is in danger. And I've actually looked up some information on Portugal. There's this nice platform, the World Value Survey, where you can see like what a large population, it's large for a psychological survey, answered in Portugal in the years 2017 to 2022. And they were asked to kind of weigh, do they rather want protection of the environment, or do they want to promote economic growth and create jobs? And what we see here is the values already kind of point, or not only kind of, but strongly point into the direction of protecting the environment. So we do have a population that's largely in favor of protecting the environment, and the rest of the people weren't decided. So this is what we work with here. And the thing is that what we've learned from psychology so far regarding the environmental crisis is that if we use pure information about the problem itself, it rarely leads to actual behavior change. So if our aim is that we want students to stand up, for example, for the ocean, or to change their everyday behaviors, it's not enough to give them the right information. So there's a combination necessary with others. It's usually it's a good basis. I always say that. We must admit that. But if you stop with giving people information about a problem, sometimes it can backfire because it has influence on other motivational parts of ourselves. And the next motivational part is this perceived responsibility. That is the awareness that our own behavior is actually relevant. So that the first one is, okay, there is a problem. The natural world, the ocean, and the marine world is in danger. But I also have to feel that, I kind of my own behavior has something to do with it. It's not only the industry, it's not only other people or other groups or other countries. It's my own behavior that can actually, or that has an impact on it. And throughout this presentation today, I want to show you some interventions, some methods that we usually use or that were studied in psychology that are useful in fostering these motivations. And here's the question of how can we make people feel more responsible for the marine environment, for example. And as I already said, teaching and highlighting values is very important, but the values already, at least from the World Value Survey, sound like quite a good basis that we can work on and that we don't have to, or maybe have to teach to the newer generations, but yeah, not to forget the other parts. And also highlighting values. So it's if we highlight that it's important for us, it does put the emphasis on the responsibility of our actions. Then there's the method of self-consciousness, which is quite interesting. There are some studies where people were put in front of a mirror and they were asked to just look at themselves. And then they, afterwards they were asked how, if they, like, how to say, how inclined they were to protect the environment on diverse, for diverse behaviors. So did they actually want to do something against environmental damage? And what the study showed is that if people raise their self-consciousness, so if they really are more aware of themselves, for example, through a mirror, but like if we transfer it, maybe also with self-reflection questions, it can foster their perceived responsibility for this cause. The third one is self-commitment here. So that most of us have probably already experienced it at one time or another, that if we commit ourselves to something, if we tell our best friend, yeah, I'm going to do this, we feel, okay, now I really have to. And of course, this also works here. So if someone wants to change their behavior, if a group of students wants to, for example, encourage their parents, that can also be an influence, to do something, they can self-commit to have a talk with them, for example. And the best self-commitment is actually when it's public. So there was a study where people were asked to write something down, like they committed themselves to now a slightly different area, to saving energy. Some of them just set the goal. Other people were writing down like a self-commitment. Okay, I'm gonna save 20% of my energy in the next month. And the last one was told that their names would be published in the newspaper. So this is kind of a public commitment. And what the study found out is that the third condition, so the newspaper, was most strongly, or led most strongly to people really wanting to, or not only wanting, but saving energy. And what is funny with this study is that they measured the energy savings in the months to come, even though, like, after the study, they told them, okay, this was only a study. We're sorry, you won't be published in the newspaper. It was just a psychological manipulation, how we term it. And what was interesting is that they continue to save more energy than the others. So the thought is that, or the interpretation of this finding is that if we think we publicly commit to something, then it becomes kind of part of ourselves, and we feel this responsibility so much more that it has much more influence in the long run. Okay, so this is kind of the first components that we usually look at, like values and knowledge. This is something that all of us have in mind, but something that was raised in your on the board is also the feeling of making a difference. And this is also very important and often not acknowledged, especially when we confront people with the problems that we face as humanity or in a local region. It usually has the possibility to give the people a feeling of, okay, I really can make a difference. So this is key. And yeah, self-efficacy can be understood as the belief that we can perform certain actions. So I actually have to feel competent to recycle, for example. In some countries, it's not that easy. And also to reach my aims with this, so that I can actually make a difference for the environmental protection and for the marine world. And the self-efficacy here can exist on various levels. We have a private self-efficacy. So I feel that I can protect the marine environment. I feel like I can protect the seals, for example. This is usually more connected to our private action. So this would be more connected to me gathering plastic on the ocean by myself. But then we also have this group efficacy. So it's not, we can feel effective as a group or as part of a group. And this is much more important if we look at activism, for example. So if we want to make people be motivated for like a beach cleanup, a joint beach cleanup, they actually have to feel that they as a group can make a difference there. So not only themselves, maybe if they feel, I'm much more effective if I do it myself, then they won't join. But that they can do something together and that they are important in this group. So this is also a big call that, when we look at groups, we always have to keep in mind that it's not only the collective, but that everyone should have like maybe a special role to play in this group in order to feel self-efficacy in this group. And there are, of course, also some means to fostering efficacy beliefs. I've done my PhD thesis on this. And here we see something that I actually put in here because you're educators. And there's an interesting study by Oyala who found that when teachers were rather solution-focused role models, so they focused a lot on hope, and we can actually change something, we can do something. And if they weren't too pessimistic, this was actually encouraging for the students. So I guess most of you that are already here are probably also these kind of solution-focused role models, but yeah, it's always good to hear that maybe. That there are studies showing it. And here we come to knowledge again. So if we provide knowledge to people, it's really important not to stick only to the problem, but actually show them what they can do and not show them too much. So I've seen so many guides, the 100 things that you can do for the environment. And this kind of gives us a feeling that we're not in control, that we lose the efficacy. If we provide knowledge on actions, it's really important to focus on maybe the 5 or even 3 most important things that we can consider, so people can actually have it in mind when they are confronted with the situation. In my PhD, I was also doing an evaluation for a coaching program where the university initiatives were coached in how to organize projects, for finding a joint vision, how they deal with arising conflict. So for a whole weekend, they received this coaching. And this is also something that I want to highlight here, that it's not always like just giving people knowledge, but sometimes you really have to train these things. And especially if we look at groups, and you probably have that a lot in schools, for example, that like a beach cleanup, it takes a lot of skills apart from picking up the trash. It takes like group organization skills, and these competences are also really important in order to feel effective in what you're doing. And then the last part is that we need to build like these, at best, these bigger visions and connect what we do with positive emotions and also positive feedback, because usually when we look at environmental and ocean protection, it's really difficult to get any feedback if what we do is actually meaningful. Like if we pick up trash at the beach, we don't know if that makes any large difference. But what we can do is give our each other social feedback. So cheer each other up, or not only up, but cheer for each other if we've done something good. And this is especially because there is oftentimes no direct feedback. It's really important to focus on the social feedback. And here I also put fun, so that you already know. But at least there's scientific evidence behind it. So the next part is social identity and norms. And for example, the collective efficacy that I just talked about, it's also based on a social identity. It's based on the question of who we are. And I've got an example here for myself. If someone asked me the question, who are you? I would, for example, say I'm a researcher, I'm from Leipzig, a member of Friends of the Earth, a sister, a musician, an environmentalist, a gardener. And these are, some of them are categories. So some of them tell or show that I feel like I belong to certain groups. And psychological findings show that these group belongings are usually I'd say underrated. So people don't perceive them as important as much as, or they don't perceive that they are that important, even though they are. And this is true, especially for the norms. So the social identity, as I already said, is the human capability to define ourselves as we. And to connect it to us is usually a should norm. So what other people think is good. This is kind of especially people that are important to me, but also people that belong to the same group as myself. And then there's the is norm, so what other people actually do. And these don't necessarily match. So especially in environmental protection, a lot of people say, we should do this, but not a lot of people actually do it. And I wanted to bring you here an example for it, for car usage, because I mean, cars still usually run on oil, and oil spills in the ocean are a critical topic. So since everything's connected, I'm gonna take this example. And here, for example, you see that someone didn't change their behavior, but they actually try to fit in, at least in their group. So there's a bike painted on the car because this person wanted to fit in their group. And how can we deal with these social norms? This is kind of the question. And the most critical part about it is that we focus on these identities that are already connected to environmental and ocean protection. Like, for example, if we talk to parents, we can highlight that they're parents and that they're responsible for the children and the world that they live in. So this is kind of an identity that might be important in this domain. Also, if someone already belongs to a movement, it's like to make them more engaged, it's really, it's good to focus on these activist identities. But if we can't think of any identity that actually fits environmental protection, there's always the identification with all humanity. So superordinate identities that we all belong to and that we can raise and argue with why it is important to, for example, protect the environment. Regarding the norms, it is really, really important to highlight the norms and trends that are actually pro-environmental. So we shouldn't, and this is really critical because a lot of communication is based on that. We shouldn't tell people too much that nothing is happening. And we shouldn't tell them that that other people are or that they also are damaging the world, because this is kind of a free card for continue to do it. Like if we think everyone else is doing it, doing nothing anyways, we can also do nothing. So we have to be really careful with not overemphasizing the bad things that are happening, and avoid this conflict. So if we tell people, you should do this, but actually no one else does it, this usually is demotivating for people. And there's an approach that's also quite interesting, the block leader approach. So if we know that there's one popular person, a well-known person in a certain area, or maybe sometimes in a classroom, it's like one student that's really that everyone goes to in order to have information, and they are kind of the spreader of these good norms. So it's sometimes useful to target those block leaders first in order to approach the others later on. Okay, this was a part on social norms. The next part is costs and benefits. I'm only gonna jump into this really quickly. And what you should have in mind is that there are, of course, monetary costs, finances, sometimes connected to environmental protection, but also behavioral costs. It can be easy or difficult. And we can actually use reward and punishment that are connected to it if we want to change one behavior. Like if we have one beach and want people to pick up these like caps from bottles, for example, we can reward them for it and maybe give 1 cent per cap or so. And if we do that, it should be close in time, so they should receive the incentive directly. It should not be too big. If they receive 100 euros just for 1 cap, they probably also, or they probably would do it, but not for a long time. And it's always with these rewards and punishments, it's always also difficult if you remove the reward. It is possible that it goes back to normal, so that nothing will happen afterwards. So I always say that it is important to look at whole lifestyles. And this is research on spillover effects. So if one behavior has an effect on another behavior, and they actually tell us that if we highlight egoistic appeals too much, for example, if we say, okay, collect these caps and you get 1 cent, then that might work like for a short time, but it won't have any longer effect or any effect on other behaviors that they do. But if we, with everything that we do, highlight that it is for marine and ocean protection, it has the possibility of spilling over to other behaviors. So if a person then does something in order to protect the marine environment and the ocean, they feel like, okay, I'm this kind of person that actually does this, and will start to think of themselves differently, and can actually, maybe this will spill over to other behavior. So it's good to focus these big aims, to always, be kind of authentic also in your communication. And research also shows that intrinsic motivation is very important for this as well. So this is, I'm already getting to the last parts. Now I have another Mentimeter, a shorter one. And with the question, what emotions do you feel regarding the damage and the protection of the ocean and marine world? So it can be positive and negative ones. And please feel free to enter them. I'm gonna look here again.
Can you put the code again, or someone in the chat? I didn't take it. Oh, it's here. Okay, it's okay. It's on the top. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. That's true. You don't see my slides right now.
I put it in the chat, just in case.
Thank you, Laura.
We have a big sadness here right now. Oh yeah, now there are a lot of exhaustion, anxiety, anger, eagerness, hopelessness, indignant. You can also name emotions that you feel when you see someone, for example, who protects the ocean and marine world. Okay, now there are some more coming up. We also have commitments, love, and hope. Okay, thank you so much. That's already kind of a broad picture of a lot of emotions that I'm also going to show you now. Pleasure, that's also a good one. When enjoying the ocean, for example. Worry, we also have here. Yeah, thank you. But as we see, sadness is the biggest one. So this is an anxiety, really dominant emotions. And yeah, unfortunately, we don't have time to go into this right now, but I can tell you, this one's still in German, I'm sorry. I'm gonna translate it. Yeah, I can at least tell you something about how emotions work from a psychological perspective. So there are quite a lot of positive emotions that can also be connected to it, like hope, like euphoria or pride when we see environmental protection mostly. And what we typically find is that these are connected to private behaviors. So if we feel these positive emotions, it's easier to act privately, for example, to go with the bag to the beach and collect garbage by myself. But also negative emotions can be useful to some degree. So there's a lot of debate about climate anxiety these days. And what research finds nowadays is that a small amount of anxiety is actually useful. If you don't feel it, you won't have the reason to act actually, but still too much anxiety can also freeze you. And it's kind of the same that happens with sadness. So anxiety and sadness are two feelings, and also guilt, that make us want to kind of close up and be by ourselves and not go out there and act. What is the emotion that's actually most important to get moving with protest and engagement is anger. So this is something that we usually don't really talk about, but anger is most important for protest, and I'm really happy that someone put it down there as well, because it's a valuable emotion. And there's also the same study that I told you before about the students. Like, when do students in a classroom feel inspired and want to do something themselves? It's actually when they feel that they can also raise their negative emotions there. So if you provide a room where they can just express their anger once in a while, or express their anxiety, talk about it, but also, don't get caught in the anxiety and sadness part. It has to go into the anger session in order to be motivated for activism. So this is kind of the interplay. So positive emotions, really important for private behavior. Negative emotions, we should be really careful with presenting people with content that makes them anxious, but give room in order to discuss anxiety and anger. And here's just the last bit for changing habits. There are also some small things that we can do, and you can read them later on because I'm already really far in time. So this is the last slide before I summarize everything. I wanted to highlight that there are different ways of looking at change. And what we often assume And the model of change that we often assume is that we change people's motivation, then they change their private behavior, and then the structures will change. Like a lot of people change their behaviors in the private sphere, and structures will change. This is also what the ecological footprint is based on. But I want to highlight here that from everything that we know from psychology, it's really, really important to build motivation if the structures that surround us are unsustainable, and if we make it really difficult for us to act in these ways. So all of the strategies that I told you today, they are actually like they can change behavior, but only always to a certain degree, and they won't make it's really difficult to get the snowball effects with these. And this is why it's really important to look at other models of change. For example, what I've already included here is that we change motivation in order to make people want to protest and volunteer and really use the capacities that they have to protect the marine environment, for example, and then change the structures because it's much closer to structural change already. This is covered with the idea of the social ecological handprint that was developed by German Watch in the German surrounding, but it's actually a concept from India. So it's looking for where can my most positive structural impact lie in schools, for example. And also the other very effective model of change is how can we actually use this to change structures in the first place, go to people and to organizations that have the capacity to do this, because usually we don't have in mind this. We usually think, we have to motivate people first and then they act, but it oftentimes works the other way around. So people act because it's the most easy action, and then they infer their own motivation from it. Okay, I did this, but this is why I'm an environmentalist. I chose the vegetarian meal. There was only a vegetarian meal possible, but this must mean that I'm an environmentalist. So the second part is focusing on structural change. And this is everything that I put in here today. The key messages are we often have enough knowledge. We need to have and apply this more complex understanding of human motivation. We need to focus structural change first and then behavioral motivation second. If we want to motivate people for structural change, we need to focus on these more activist groups, providing them with the possibility to raise their anger and with the feeling of we jointly can do something. And if we want to motivate people for private changes, it's more the personal and social norms. The surroundings have to be as easy as possible, and they have to feel this self-efficacy. And if you want to work with the book that I presented at first, we also have like a brainstorming tool, a canvas that you can do this with. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the talk and have a lot of questions probably now because it was a lot of information.
Thank you, Karen. That was really lovely. And yeah, everyone feel free to just raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask something that is on your mind, or maybe you'd like to share an idea that came to your mind, how you could integrate this into the school environment. I mean, Karen already gave some nice examples, but it would be interesting to hear from you, teachers and students, or whoever's joining, what your ideas are.
Well, okay, Patricia, you go.
No, go, Lucrecia, go.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen. It was very interesting what you told about, what you enlightened us about psychology and how it works on environmental stuff. And I was thinking about when you were speaking about self-efficacy and group efficacy, and it reminded me of the meeting in Brazil where we had been talking about the ocean literacy dialogues, and it came to my mind the idea of the bottom-up processes working in the same way, from self-efficacy of schools to group efficacy of governments and stakeholders' actions. It's kind of similar. I find a parallelism between these, because schools have to engage, and that is in relationship to their own self-efficacy, and then there has to be a group efficacy working all together. That was,
yeah, that's a really good idea. Yeah, that's to connect it with something. The project that I'm working on right now is on the topic of energy communities, and there they also find that if the energy communities can be founded either by the people, by the citizens at the location, or also by governance, by the local government, and people usually only or feel much more effective if it's founded from the bottom up. So if they are actually involved. And I think that's also, yeah, like you already said, a good call for participation in these decision-making processes. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. I really enjoyed your talk. It was amazing. I never see ocean literacy from this side, from this perspective. So it was really, really helpful and really fun. And I really like the social norms and the should norm and the is norm. And because you gave the example of the car, I got thinking, because in Portugal now, a lot of people are opting for electric cars because they can't use a bike, but they can at least do the best they can. But is using an electric car a should norm or a is norm?
So something that I didn't talk about is that you can use norm trends as well. So this is in the communication always a good thing, or the clever thing to do. If you know only, let's say 5% of the people are using electric cars these days, it's not an is norm that you would tell people if you want to motivate them. But you can say every year it's like 1% more of the population, or it increases like that much percent. You can use these normative trends in order to promote it. So this is also an is norm. That's maybe that's better to use. Yeah, but in terms of if it's actually better or not, that's something that's out of my sphere, and I don't know how the surroundings in Portugal are. So I guess it always depends. But this is maybe also the proposal that I made in the end. How can we actually build the structures and make it easier to maybe at all refrain from using a car? Make it possible. But of course, this is kind of the big aim and vision.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Maybe I also have a question, actually. You shortly mentioned the socio-ecological handprint. You maybe just tell a few more words about it and how it's different from the well-known ecological footprint, maybe? And maybe you could close your presentation so we can actually see each other better.
Yes.
That's nice. Yeah, that's true. Let's see. I think. Did it work?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, every one of us knows the ecological footprint by now, I guess, and the psychological studies that I know on it kind of tell us that it carries the possibility to also demotivate people if they just do the ecological footprint, because they usually see, well, at least in Germany it's the case. I don't know how that's in Portugal, but usually you can reduce it to a certain amount, but there's always this kind of set point just from living in a certain country, for example. So it actually also tells you you can't be that effective. And the small amount of tons in CO2, yeah, they won't necessarily make a difference. And there are studies on it that people don't feel much more motivated after doing the ecological footprint. But the handprint it's a new concept that, like, the story behind it is that it was made up by a little girl in India, and was taken up by an organization there to kind of give it a counterpart. So to not only represent, okay, this is the bad footprint that we have on our Earth, but this is also like the big handprint, that the positive handprint that we can put on the wall. So to kind of transform the concept. And like, there's a lot of work being done, and for example, methods, but I think they're mostly in German these days, because yeah, the organization that I told you about, German Watch, they are really strongly, and a friend of mine who's involved in there are strongly promoting this handprint concept, and they're working on methods how people can get into thinking, well, where could I actually make a bigger change? Like, what kind of social environments am I involved? I'm, for example, involved in a school, but also I have my own family. I'm part of a neighborhood. And where actually do I want to get involved? Where, yeah, could be a bigger level of change. And yeah, but it's a concept that's still in the making. I think they do have like this. Since there are a lot of footprint calculators, they're working on a handprint calculator, even though I don't know how you can actually calculate your own social impact. Yeah, but I think that already like putting emphasis on our own social influence in this is really important. And this is also what a lot of research shows, that we have much more influence on others than we actually think. And especially minority influence works slowly. So if we're the only ones in our whole school, like if we are maybe a group of teachers and we are the only ones wanting to use, what's the example, to print double side, this is a really small example, then if we raise our voice, it might be that people are, we don't know at first, but this minority influence takes a lot of time. So you usually don't get positive feedback right away. It has to linger in the minds of people first. So this is maybe why we underestimate our social influence. And the handprint would be a concept of focusing this a little more. Yeah. Thanks. But I can also, in the aftermath, I can look for things in English that I can maybe also send you.
Thank you. I really like the positive notion of this handprint in comparison to the footprint, actually. Yeah. As we're kind of approaching the end of the session, I would say maybe, is there anyone who has a last comment or question? Otherwise, I would kind of wrap it up.
Yeah, just say that, Karen, there are some people asking you to leave your email in the chat, if you can access the chat.
That's a really good idea. Yeah. I also wanted to say, if you have any questions in the aftermath, you can always write me. I'm not always the fastest in answering, but I will answer at some point.
Thank you.
And just to remember the teachers present here, that Karen has left an exercise you can do with your students, and the link to that exercise is in our platform. So yeah.
Yeah, it's part. So I kind of used the handbook Karen talked about.
I think it's Laura's creativity.
Yeah, and it tracks and got the part out of it, which is really I think is fun to do with students actually. And there's also directly under it already the link to the entire handbook. If you would like to read it, you can see it on the Psicologia Social website. I think Bernardo just posted the link to it. Yeah, so yeah, feel free to check it out. Maybe it inspires you to do something with your students. And also I would like to promote maybe a bit that next week is another session, and I feel like now you have a really good very sophisticated knowledge of or the intro into psychology. And next week you would, if you would like to join, learn from Kat from a student organization Force of Nature, which has involved into really, it's a social business now, and they do workshops especially on climate anxiety with students, but also with adults. So, and she's an artist and activist. So I guess she will add a really interesting view on the whole topic to it. Yeah, and it's happening next Thursday. No, when is it, Bernardo? Next Thursday? Yes. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Next Thursday, yes, 27.
Yeah, same time. Yeah. So yeah, I think that'll be fun for you as well. Yeah.
And sorry, Laura. Francisco was just asking if he can have access to the template worksheets that were on the end of the presentation. And I think they're part of the handbook that is in our platform, right?
Yes, and also part of the exercise, actually.
So yes.
Yeah. So I guess that's it. Karen, do you have anything more to share, or you happy?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for your great work that you're doing, to all of the, to the far west. Yeah.
I guess we can all give that back to you as well, actually. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.